Hello, everybody, and welcome to your Ruby Live event. My name is Eric Wynkoop, and I'm the Director of Culinary Instruction, and I'm also one of your chef instructors in the courses. Today, in particular, I want to welcome you to my office hours. This is your chance to ask food and cooking related questions, and my opportunity to do my best to answer those in a helpful way. And we've got a list of questions that are pre-populated today in the queue. And I want to mention a couple of items. Number one, if you'd like to participate more directly, you're welcome to submit a question or a comment in the dialog box in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And then also, the second item is you'll see a heart-shaped icon in the box with each of the questions. And if you'd like a question answered sooner than later, go ahead and click on that heart-shaped icon. That'll push it up in priority. But fear not, I will get to all the questions today. And, without, further delay, let me go ahead and jump into the questions. And the first one is from Gauro, who says, I completed my advanced diploma in culinary arts in 2019 and currently work as a pizza chef in Italy. I was considering the Ruby Pro Chef course to help me get a job as a culinary chef. Question is it worth it? So this is an interesting question, without knowing further details about your situation, Gaurav, but I'll go ahead and share some thoughts, of course, that come to my mind. And I'm reading Advanced Diploma in Culinary Arts 6 or so years ago. And my guess is that this education focused on the cuisine side of the kitchen versus baking and pastry. And, I don't know the duration of your course, but with my familiarity is that if it's a diploma course, it's probably in the neighborhood of a year or so in duration. So our professional cook certification course, I call it Pro Cook for short, focuses on the cuisine or the savory side of the kitchen. And we have a plant-based course in addition. We have some baking and pastry courses as well. And so my impression is that our Pro Cook course would overlap significantly with your experience with your advanced diploma in culinary arts. I also want to mention a couple of things. Our Pro Cook course is based upon originally an on-ground, culinary diploma program, of about 8 or 9 months duration. So that fits the bill very often for a 1 year-ish culinary diploma program. And what I would encourage you to do is take a look at ruby.com and click on the individual courses. You'll see a couple of buttons to click on, and then toward the top of the page there, you'll see the professional cook certification course. Go ahead and click into that and take a look at the syllabus, right, or the table of contents, right, of that course, and just read through all the topics that are covered. It's extensive, but see how it overlaps or not with your experience from 2019. And I think that'll give you a great starting point, as to whether that particular course would, help you additionally in your career planning. Now, another thought that comes to mind is our Pro Plant course, our professional plant-based cooking course, which is similar in duration. It'll probably take you, 8 or so months to complete. And it's our other long course here at Ruby. And we do have a number of students that go through that course and then, with aspirations to do something professionally around food. And we have both students that are already in the industry that want to get some experience, some insight to plant-based cooking, as well as those that are new or sort of on their way to a new experience in the industry to work professionally with food. And so that one would, if you don't have a solid foundation in plant-based cookery, that could be something for you to consider. Thank you very much for that question, Gaura. And if you have additional questions, follow up, for example, to this conversation, feel free to reach out to me at support@rouxbe.com, and I'd be happy to continue this conversation. Thanks a lot. Next up, we've got a question from Janet, who says, "Hi there. I live in North Carolina in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains and finding it difficult to find healthy plant-based eateries. I would like to offer weekend workshops once I am done with the course and wanted some advice on how to get started." Aha. So this is a question that we get every once in a while. It's students that have this entrepreneurial spirit and want to do something professionally with their education and training. And the first thing that I recommend is to take the time to build out a business plan around whatever concept you have for your workshops. And a business plan, if you really want to drill down and I'll say do it right, it'll take some time, it'll take some good effort, and it'll provide tremendous insight as to whether your idea is, as you currently have it framed, is viable in your environment, in your marketplace. It'll highlight weaknesses, it'll highlight gaps, and it's just a great tool to get to know better the thought that you have in your mind. And I guess I'll add just some things here to fill out the discussion here, and that is, you want to take a look at what's currently going on in your marketplace, in terms of similar workshops or other educational classes, and take a look at hands-on as well as just view only. As well as maybe hybrid sort of classes that are offered by different organizations or in different venues. So sometimes I see these at community colleges. Sometimes I see these offered by individuals privately. Take a look at the various price points offered by these different entities. Sort of take the time to define what sort of a domain or a menu type that you would want to focus on, whether it's a certain type of cuisine, whether it's savory foods only, whether it's appetizers and canapes, or maybe a focus on desserts or something else, at least as a starting point, keeping in mind that you can always add to the business plan as time goes on, as your concept matures, as you recognize a strong following or, a demand in your area. Also think about whether you will do these live or online. That makes a difference in terms of your presentation, your equipment needs, your range of marketing, and the types of folks that you might appeal to. So again, just a few things to think about. Again, all of that would be covered, plus a lot more in a business plan. In order to get started with a business plan, you can do a Google search. You're going to find a lot of information. I also like to suggest to consider score.org, SCORE.org. It's an organization that's staffed by volunteers, and there's a lot of information that you can access for free. You can also team up with a volunteer that would be coming with experience specific to the food service industry to really provide some deep insight. And this is all part of the Small Business Administration and part of the U.S. federal government. And so please take a look at that as well as a resource to get you started. Thanks, Janet. All right, next up, I've got a question from Karen who says, How to keep an organized fridge and freezer? Question mark. Is there a method to the madness? I seem to collect container after container of ingredients and meals. What's your meal planning process to avoid this? Wow, this is, I think, a pretty common, at least from time to time, issue that a lot of people experience. And I'll share my own experience, and that is that it goes in waves. Sometimes I'm more disciplined, and sometimes I'm less disciplined. But I'll start by sharing I think it's a good housekeeping tip, and that is to label and date your, especially leftovers, in containers. And to have a pen and some masking tape in the kitchen, you can, in just a few seconds, place a label on that item. And if it's going into the freezer, definitely write down what is contained in that container. Because a lot of times, you have these different things that you think, oh gosh, I'm going to remember that. I spent so much time making it. How can I forget? But once it goes in the freezer, it starts to look like other things that you've spent so much time on and have kind of a brownish hue to. And then they're covered in frost and this sort of thing. So put a complete label on them. And that's step one in managing the inventory. And this is definitely a tip from professional kitchens. This is a 100% must do, sort of a organizational tip, I guess, that I would say most professional cooks and chefs utilize. So the other thing is to try to avoid over purchasing product. And I mean, over purchasing to me simply means that your fridge is so full that it's hard to manage. And so, how much that is exactly is going to differ from person to person and situation to situation. You also have to weigh that against your usage rate of the food. For example, are you cooking for one? Or are you cooking for 3 or 4 teenagers? In which case a full fridge could be empty in about 36 hours. So you get to kind of consider your larger environment as well. Also, I like to eat my leftovers within a pretty short period of time. So in other words, I don't mind eating the same thing or a similar thing consecutively, in order to enjoy that food in its relatively fresh state. Keeping in mind that the longer you keep something right in the fridge or even in the freezer for that matter, the longer you're trying to maintain the freshness of old food. And that's another perspective you can take on leftovers. Okay. So while most items will last, a week or so, there's certainly a deterioration in quality over that period of time. The food is going to be arguably better the following day versus 5 days later. Okay. So consider getting back to that food item relatively quick, so that you can enjoy it. Or again, label it thoroughly and put it in the freezer and then try to get back to it in a reasonable amount of time. And for me, a reasonable amount of time would be within about 30 days. Things in the freezer can get lost. And here too, I will say that it can go in waves where I'm better at utilizing things from the freezer, usually, but there are times when I get excited about cooking, and I'm always excited about cooking, but just focusing on the things in the refrigerator to the detriment of the things in the freezer. So keep some discipline to go back to the freezer and bring those things out. Defrost them in the refrigerator overnight as necessary to maintain maximum freshness, rather than at room temperature, where you can get sort of uneven temperatures within the container, warm on the outside, cold on the inside. And when we subject food to warmer temperatures especially this time of year, then our bacteria counts can increase pretty rapidly. And so that would be, the concern that I have for defrosting things at room temperature. I'm not saying don't do it, but I am saying keep a thumb on it so that you can do it for a reasonably short period of time. But in the refrigerator is always the safest. But again, you got to get to it once it's defrosted after that half a day or so, because once you bring it back into the fridge and it's defrosted, then keep in mind that the clock resumes. And the clock meaning that before you put it in the freezer, right? Maybe it was in the fridge for 3 days and then you froze it. Once it's defrosted, that clock starts again. And so it's not a fresh item that you're working with, but a 3-day-old item. And if the shelf life is a week or so, you only have another 3 days or so to enjoy it. So keep that in mind as you're dealing with defrosted items right from the freezer. And let's see here. The other thing is just to bring some general organization into your refrigerator, where you might have leftover items in containers in a certain area, a certain shelf or two, and then you've got your fresh produce and condiments and things in different places. So you know where to look for this, where to look for these items, and where to go for these other items, in the refrigerator. If things start to get all mixed up into one space, then it starts to become difficult, because that shard or those lettuce leaves, can cover up a small, not even a small container, but a good sized container that's pushed back, in the refrigerator. So, just start out with some of these real basic organizational strategies, and then have the discipline to stay on top of that, to reorganize the refrigerator a couple of times a week so that things don't get out of hand. I hope those basics are going to be helpful for you, Karen, and enjoy the road ahead. Thank you. Okay, next up, we have a question from Leslie, who says, what are the legalities we need to be concerned with when teaching others a recipe from a cookbook found online or from Forks Over Knives? Is giving credit enough, verbally or in print? Do we need to ask permission? So, this does indeed get into the legal sphere, which falls outside of my domain. And but I will, share some general thoughts and considerations here. And one is that one should avoid, taking a recipe wholesale as is and presenting it as one's own, right? That form of plagiarism can infringe on copyright laws as well. So, if we take inspiration from a recipe, maybe we change it, to some extent. Certainly, we should change any introductions, any textual context that might come along with that recipe, such as how the author was traveling in the countryside of Tuscany and came across this great experience at a restaurant and then brings this recipe to you and so on and so forth. If that's not your own experience, then we should certainly not bring that into the recipes that we're borrowing or taking from some other source. When it comes to the ingredients themselves that go into a recipe, generally these are more difficult to protect. But still take into consideration the idea of altering it a little bit. And, this is where the Rouxbe approach comes into play. Okay. And that is, right, in our courses, Forks Over Knives or Pro Plant or Pro Cook or our other shorter courses, we focus on cooking methods and other handling techniques rather than on recipes, such that once you go through our course, right, the idea for you and us, right, is for you to have the confidence to start to alter recipes to make them your own. And even if you take inspiration from a recipe and you start to make changes to it, I like this type of potato instead of this. I want to add cardamom and ginger because I like that. I think it goes well with these other main ingredients. Or I'm going to change the knife cuts and the presentation. Then all of a sudden, what you're producing is a new product, a new dish, one that you can call your own. Now, it's also considered courteous by many to give credit, right, where credit is due, in meaning that if you did take inspiration from a particular recipe, a particular bakery, a particular chef, that you might note that your recipe was adapted from ... and provide some explanation or context, if you wish to do that. I think this holds true for regardless of the source of your recipes, whether it's from a cookbook or online or from Forks Over Knives or some other source. What I've just explained, Leslie, is very high level, general, sort of an approach, how to be a polite cook, sort of an approach. But if you want to look at, the more refined boundary and some of the fine-tuned legalities around these topics, then I suggest that you sit down with somebody with a focus on copyright law and this sort of domain of law to get some more pointed advice. Okay, especially if it's your intent to create a booklet or a cookbook of sorts that might go along with whatever it is that you're intending to do. Thank you. All right, next up, we have a question from Sue, who says, I would love to grow cilantro, but have not been successful at all with this herb. Any suggestions would help. Thanks. Sue, I have had success with cilantro. Sometimes I think my success in the garden is accidental success. I don't claim to be a gardener, although I certainly enjoy the garden. When it comes to cilantro, I've noticed a couple of probably main points. And one is cilantro doesn't like extremely hot weather and intense sun. I'm in the Portland metro area today in Oregon, and we just are coming down from a upper 90s degree Fahrenheit weekend, and that would be too much for cilantro. We're getting down into the mid 80s, which is probably a happier place for this particular herb. And also not too much water, right, in the soil. So if your soil is particularly dense, then it should be amended to lighten it up for better drainage. And so those are the couple of things that I picked up over the years. I'm sure there are some other fine tuning that one can do, but start out with those and see how your particular environment stacks up. Thank you. Maria is up next. Good to see you, Maria. It's so nice that you participate in so many of these live events. The question today is, what type of non-alcoholic cold beverage could be offered at a plant-based summer cookout that would be a crowd pleaser? Okay, so no animal products in these beverages. All right, so I presume that would be dairy sort of products. Although we could presumably consider, these plant-based milks, right? Let me come up with a couple of things that I like to do, even just for myself, and maybe you can enjoy this on your own too, Maria. One is, once you've got fantastic watermelons that you can access, put those in a blender as is, with a squeeze of lime juice. And that's it. I have made shooters and just refreshing drinks in the afternoon for lots of people. Simply doing that. Not to mention, it's one of my favorites as we get into the peak summer months, especially July and August around here. Let's see. In addition, other like berry-based blended drinks come to mind, and in this case, in order to lighten it up for a summertime outing, I'm going to think smoothie as an inspiration, but rather than getting into these milk bases, I'm going to use water instead. And so blueberry works nicely. It could be a blend of berries, whatever it is that you want to try out. Water as a base. And then I like to add spices. Think about cardamom, green cardamom, and cloves can work. Go light on the cloves. Ginger can work well. And a touch of turmeric, but do a tester first because it can also alter the color in a certain way that you may or may not want. Okay. Not that the turmeric adds, well, if you add enough of it, especially in its fresh form, you'll get that distinctive earthiness of turmeric. But I just like turmeric, for its health benefits. I've been told a couple of times by cooks in India, when in doubt, add turmeric. And that sticks with me. And I think that's pretty good advice, even for beverages, for desserts, for whatever it is that you happen to be making. But anyways, a blended berry-based drink based on water with the addition of some spice would be nice. And when it comes to spices, don't add too much. You don't want to make it too complicated. You start to lose the distinction of those flavors that are so nicely presented in a blueberry drink, for example. Let's see. You can do a tea-based drink, and it could be green tea, right? It could be black tea. And if you do something like these, of course, have caffeine, so you want to be aware of who your audience is, or at least advertise it or label it as such. And as far as black tea goes, consider Earl Grey, which has the addition of bergamot. So it's got that little hint of orangey citrus notes, which goes very nicely when chilled and turned into some sort of a beverage. And it could be non-alcoholic. And if you want to try something alcoholic, bergamot, flavored black tea in its Earl Grey form works well too. You can blend your own tea. So if you've got, green tea, you can add lemongrass to it and give it a little spin. Some spices, you can play with some spices as well to give it another dimension of flavor, another layer of interest. If you think about also mint, these aromatics that can go a long way in enhancing something simple, right? Like black tea or green tea. But think about mint, muddled and allowed to steep, right, in a green tea, for example. And also fruit waters can be very easy, right, to make. It's just sliced cucumber, sliced berries, and put into water for some period of time. And you might want to do some testing to see just the intensity that you want, whether it's overnight or just for a couple of hours for something lighter. And then you just serve the water, right? Maybe you garnish it with a slice of cucumber. Maybe the cucumber is combined with lemon verbena or peppermint or something else. Think about chocolate mint as well and how that might go with some of these different beverage bases. Okay. So those are a few ideas that come to mind, things that I've enjoyed off and on, in recent years, and things that I have noticed that other people like as well. Thank you. All right, next up, we've got a question from Cecilia. Hello, Cecilia. So in providing classes on plant-based cooking, how do you determine what to charge per person per class over the cost of food supplies? Okay, TY, thank you. So, here, much like the topic we talked about earlier in today's program, we're talking about starting a business, which entails a business plan, or if you want to do an abbreviated version of that, I'll leave that up to you. But at least take a look at the section of the business plan that's going to get you out and looking at the competition, because you want to know what is already being done, and can be accessed by folks, that you're thinking about. So in other words, you might have live cooking classes that people from, some radius, like maybe a 20-mile radius or a 50-mile radius, might travel to attend. But also in this day and age, we have a lot of online or virtual classes, which means that you could have an audience and therefore competition around the world. And so you want to take a look at both individuals as well as some of these online platforms that offer cooking classes, and see what people are offering relative to the concept that you have in mind. Okay. Excuse me just a second here. So, some of these classes are view only, whether it's virtual or in person, where as the student or the audience member, I'm just watching you do the work. And you're going to talk about it. You're going to interweave some stories, your experiences, ingredient substitutions, how to do it one way or the other, how to make alterations for maybe one dietary restriction type or another. And I'm just listening. Another variation of this, even for a virtual class, is for me to go buy the ingredients in the case of a virtual class, and cook alongside you as you're talking me through it online. And you're going to talk to me about aromas to pick up on at this cooking stage or the next cooking stage, and what sort of textures to look for, what sounds to look for, during sautéing or simmering, for example. If it's going to be an in-person class, then I have a chance to step up to the prep table with you and get my hands dirty, so to speak, and knead some dough or do some slicing or whatever it is that is going to get me kinesthetically involved, right, with the class. And the more I'm involved, right, the more I'm going to learn, the more I'm going to retain. This gets into some of the pedagogy and andragogy of designing a cooking class, but understand that there are many types of learners. And if you can interweave different opportunities for learning. So there's, the visual, there's the audio type of a learner, as well as the hands-on kinesthetic learner, and smells and things help us as well. So if you can get people involved in these different ways, it can enhance the learning outcome for your students. And then the next stage would be just full on hands-on, right? Where maybe you do a quick demo up front, and then you let the students go to their cooking stations and then just do everything themselves. Maybe your demo only focuses on a critical technical step that's particularly difficult and benefits from some like a 15-minute intensive before you let the student again go back to their cooking station to execute the whole recipe or the menu, depending again on what it is that you are offering. So those are just some different things to think about. but you want to, again, see what others are doing relative to these types of teaching scenarios and what sort of price points are out there. Okay. And if you have a chance, and this is something that I do occasionally, go sign up for a class and see what people are actually doing for the price point at which that class is offered. And, again, sometimes these are going to be, at community colleges, sometimes they're online, sometimes they're done privately in some fashion or another. Okay. And then your goal would be to kick it up a notch, to provide an even better value than what they're offering out there. Okay. And then, when it comes to the cost of food supplies, you need to cost out. We call it costing, recipe costing, but we cost out the recipe and the menu, and or the entire program, depending on what it is you're offering. And basically that means that you're going to write down all the ingredients and how you buy that ingredient. Okay, so in the bottle size, the can size, the bag size, or by the pound. And then you want to break that cost down to how much you actually use for that recipe. So if you buy potatoes in a 25-pound bag, but you're only using 3 potatoes, in the recipe, you have to break down that 25-pound purchase cost to a $3 recipe unit cost. The other step is that we also have to take into consideration any trim loss when we trim produce or other items that require cleaning and trimming, things that have shells or skins or things that need to be removed before we use them. At least let me think here. As I think about this, in a cooking class setting, if you're going to give those raw ingredients to your student or your client to jump in and do some hands-on work with, then maybe we don't need to worry about trim loss. Okay, but I will mention that if you're going to do some retail work, like restaurant, cafe, catering sort of work, where you're preparing foods for people, then definitely you do want to do the calculation that takes into consideration trim loss. Okay, so in that case, I'll just do a quick explanation here. If you're preparing roasted potato, let's say mashed potatoes, right, where you take the skins off and then you deal with the potatoes, maybe those skins account for 15% of the weight of the potatoes. And so you buy the potatoes in a 25-pound bag, you spend X number of dollars per pound. You're using 3 pounds in the recipe, so you break down that cost from a 25-pound purchase cost to a 3-pound recipe cost. We call this the as purchased cost, the AP cost. And then you want to then make the calculation to what we call the edible portion. We call it the EP cost and the edible portion cost. And this takes into consideration the trim loss after taking off the peels, right, in this case. And the way you do that is you take the AP cost, the as purchase cost per pound, and then you divide it by what's left after trimming as a percentage. So in our example here, it would be 85% yield, because we're just, for the sake of this conversation, we're estimating that the peels and all that would be 15% of the weight, right? So we have a utilizable portion or a yield of 85%. So we would take that that cost per pound, divide it by 85% or 0.85. That actually increases the price per pound taking into consideration the 15% trim loss. And then it's at that higher price per pound that we calculate the amount that's used in that dish for the mashed potatoes that you're making. Okay, so in a restaurant setting, you always want to pass on the cost of the peels and bones and shells and stuff to the customer. Okay, and keep in mind, right, as a consumer, that's one reason why menu prices are approximately 3 times higher than what you would pay if you prepared that same dish at home. Not only are you paying for overhead expenses and labor costs, but also the food cost itself and the trim loss. That's part of that food cost calculation. Okay, but back to your cooking classes here. You want to just take a look at the food cost that goes into each of the ingredients to make up the recipe, and then do that for all the recipes that go into the menu, right, that you're producing or that the student would be producing. And then, think about your time. And if you hire somebody, maybe an assistant to help in some capacity, you have to pay them, on an hourly basis or on an event basis, and then go from there, right, in terms of calculating the retail price to the consumer. Okay, but you always want to position yourself fairly and reasonably in the marketplace, so you need to know what your competition is providing. Okay, and so this is where I suggest that you actually go out and take a couple of classes that are similar to the what you have in mind for your own concept. All right, I hope that gets you started. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. And next up is from Tamara. The question is, does Rouxbe offer a culinary class specifically designed for children or teens? All of our classes are designed for anyone in the kitchen, as far as I'm concerned. We have teenagers right now enrolled in Forks Over Knives, as well as Pro Plant. And, on occasion, we have students that are middle schoolers and high schoolers that I see that are enrolled in our courses. And so, cooking is cooking. I think whether you're a kiddo or an adult, and we need to learn the same things like food safety and sanitation, how to handle a knife safely, how to saute, how to roast. All these sort of foundational points apply to anybody, regardless of age, who's in the kitchen. And so I think that I'll say certainly for teens, the courses that we offer, whether it's the long courses or the short courses, are going to be perfectly suitable. Now, when it comes to kiddos, it just depends on how old they are. We've got a boy he's 19 now, but he started cooking when he was, 2 years old or so. And so certainly the tasks that he was doing at that age, at age 2, were much simpler. And it was a couple of years later before he was introduced to a knife, and a couple of years after that before he was, being taught to manage fire. But all those things too can be done at a relatively young age, with supervision, of course, so that the student, that young student, can learn these best practices, and then they just grow up with it. And there's a very easy sort of way of navigating the food world as an adult. I think it's one of the best gifts that you can give your child or other young people in your lives. The insight to food and the skill of cooking. But our kiddo here is a graduate of the Forks Over Knives course, as well as our introduction to baking and pastry course. So And he did each of those in a summer during summer vacation in different years, because they're about 3 months in duration, and it makes for a great summer, and very fun, very interactive for everybody at home. Regarding shopping, and if you grow any food, then there's even if it's herbs, um, start growing some food, some ingredients, to bring that into the realm of possibilities and food handling for these young cooks. And yeah, have fun with it. We do offer some shorter courses, than FOK. FOK is also plant-based. If you want something that's not plant-based, then we've got some of those choices as well. But I encourage you, Tamara, to consider the courses that we have for everybody, including the children and teens in your world. Thank you. Next up from Paula. Hi there. Can you share with us what type or brand of tray you use to roast vegetables? Mine warp at high temperature, looking for recommendations. Many thanks. Yes. So there are a few solid brands that you would also find, in commercial kitchens. And let me step up here and just provide some context. In commercial kitchens, you find flimsy things sometimes too. And it just depends on, the budget at the time of opening the establishment. Yeah, I've worked in a lot of kitchens, and I've come across some places that have some warped pans as well. But for sheet pans, if you aim for something that's around 13 gauge, these will be aluminum pans. There's stainless steel pans as well, and those are fine. They work great. Most of my experience is with aluminum, and 13 gauge is relatively, it's pretty heavy. And I've never seen a warped 13 gauge pan. As you start to get thinner, certainly upwards around 18 gauge. When I say upwards, right, as the number gets bigger, the metal gets thinner. 18 gauge is thinner metal, right? 13 gauge is thicker metal. As you start to get into these thinner gauges, then at those higher temperatures, like in the mid 400s or above 500 degrees, then you can start to experience some of that warping. Let's see, take a look at some information online just to see what the broader options are. But one company is Vollrath that comes to mind, Vollrath. They're an American company based in the Midwest, somewhere. Pardon me, I just don't remember which state it is. But they're used a lot in commercial kitchens. I think I've got some half sheet pans in the kitchen from Vollrath, but there are other companies too that make some good quality, heavy gauge sheet pans. Check out, there's a website, I think it's restaurants.com or something like that sells a bunch of restaurant equipment, including smallwares, like sheet pans. And you can, at the very least, take a look at the different specifications and start to learn about the different products out there, so that as you read more broadly, you understand what people are dealing with, what they're talking about, and what might be best for your setting. Okay, I hope that's helpful. And take some time, to select those best items, because although they will cost more, they will last the rest of your life. And so I think it's a fair investment. Have fun. Thank you. And then the last question for today, this is from Diane, who says, what is green cardamom? So green cardamom is a spice. It's It grows commonly in India. It's from South Asia, from India. It's grown elsewhere too, in places like Guatemala, but originally comes from India. And it's very aromatic, and it's used for savory as well as sweet cooking and beverages as well as food. It's used as a mouth freshener. Um, but it's about that big, comes in a hull. You can use it whole, or you can remove the hull and use just those seeds inside. If you remove the hull, try to use the hull in something that's going to be strained out, like in tea, for example, because the hull has flavor as well. I hate to see that being thrown away because it has nice value. But it's green cardamom is I'll say the common version of cardamom that we see, or we hear about when we talk about, maybe Indian cooking, for example. There's also black cardamom or brown cardamom. It's larger. And there are different versions, but those are the two common ones. Black cardamom or brown cardamom, this larger version, is dried over an open flame, and so it takes on a smoky quality. And so both of these have a menthol sort of an aspect to its flavor profile, but the brown cardamom can be used to impart smokiness to dishes as well, because of the way it's been treated. And so anyway, Diane, go check out spices and start to add them to your cooking repertoire. My recommendation is to go to an Indian or other South Asian grocery store. Maybe it's a halal store that is in your neck of the woods. These places tend to have, in my experience, the highest turnover of the inventory, because the clientele are using these spices every day, right, in their cooking. So the inventory at the stores tends to be relatively fresh, second only to going to India, for example, and bringing stuff home, which is absolutely phenomenal. That can't be beat. But otherwise, find an Indian grocery store. And then just try one spice at a time and get to know it. Then go get another one and slowly build up your knowledge and your experience around spices. They have a lot of medicinal qualities. They have a lot of phytonutrients, many of which we don't even know about at this point. And I recommend to everybody to get spices right into their diet, because it's just good for you in addition to tasting and smelling good. And as I mentioned earlier, when in doubt, add turmeric. All right, thank you very much. This brings to conclusion today's program, and I look forward to seeing you all again. Until then, happy cooking.